Hello, I'm Susan King, the Dean of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication here at UNC, with a very top journalist. But the way I like to say it, Paul Steiger, is not only are you a top journalist, but you're a man of the past and the man of the future all rolled up in one.
Oh, well, wow. That's pretty cool.
I think so, and that's why being the first lecturer here of the 2012 year is so important to me as a new dean here. Because you've won all the accolades and all the prizes and all the pressure of having been the managing editor and the top guy on the editorial side for the Wall Street Journal for many years. And then you reverse course and start a whole new venture of nonprofit news called ProPublica, which is also knocking everyone's socks off by winning Pulitzers. So you do bring it all up in one. What's more fun, the old game or the new game?
They were both fun. I mean, obviously, being able to run the news staff of the Wall Street Journal for 16 years was a dream come true.
Yeah.
In fact, a dream I never dared to dream until it happened. And running 700 journalists all over the world for a fantastic audience of people that can really make things happen, that was very, very exciting. But then when I retired from that, to have the opportunity to start something completely new, ProPublica, a team of 33 investigative journalists with a mandate to shine a spotlight on abuse of power and failure to uphold the public interest and make it available first on our website and second through partnerships with other news organizations in order to help the public produce change. That's just so exciting, and I've been thrilled to get closer to the news and to create something.
There were a lot of doubters when you started ProPublica. I mean, you had a nice backing of philanthropists who felt watchdog journalism was important to America. They gave you $30 million, but some people thought it wouldn't work. Did you ever doubt?
I must have had some questions in my mind, but I never focused on the doubts. To me, the opportunity was so exciting because, as I don't need to tell you, we're in a period where, because of the dramatic change in the environment for news, the destruction of the business model that was so successful for newspapers for the 40 years that I was in print newspapers, what that has done is cause newspapers to cut their staffs dramatically, and particularly to reduce the, in some cases eliminate the investigative reporting teams, and also not have the ability to have beat reporters take time off from filling the daily slots in the paper to pursue an important case that would take a few weeks, something that they used to be able to do all the time. So society was getting this important check on power, and now it's for a decade now, even before the financial crisis, this the number of reporters doing this has shrunk. So to me, the opportunity was so enormous to carry on this activity, to carry on the techniques and bring them to a new generation, and also replace some of what was lost. And indeed, we've been able to do that.
But what about nonprofit? I mean, the idea was that you do it as a nonprofit. What made you think that could work?
Well, first of all, it's the case of necessity being the mother of invention. You know, when I was editing the Wall Street Journal, I had an annual news budget of about $100 million a year.
Nice.
And in that budget, you could fit a certain number, 30, 40, some years maybe a bit more, major stories that took reporters weeks, sometimes months to do, at a cost of salaries alone of several $100,000 sometimes, because you were doing thousands of stories that were the Open Market Committee of the Federal Reserve voted to hold interest rates steady, and that takes an experienced reporter 45 minutes to do, or an earnings story, or the unemployment rate, all of these things that were important to the audience of the Wall Street Journal, but which were not very costly. So in that kind of integrated environment, you could spend large sums of money trying to dig out some abuse of power. Well, at ProPublica, because that's the piece that's most missing, that's what we focus on. So everything we do is a very high cost. The only way, there's only two ways you can fund that kind of thing. One is to provide it to a bunch of hedge funds, who will, pay you $10,000 or $100,000 a year for access to this kind of reporting that maybe they can make money trading on, or it's to do it as a nonprofit, to do it with the support of philanthropy. The same way museums and orchestras and ballet companies and Harvard, Yale, and Stanford are funded, and even state schools now increasingly reach out to philanthropy to support themselves.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the nonprofit model is a way for good journalism of different types to survive? Is this the new model going forward?
I think it is a model.
Okay.
It is not the model by any stretch of the imagination. I think that what is happening now is that we've gone from a model that was hugely stable for 40 years to one that is constantly changing. A model that was dominated by a relatively small number of very strong institutions, the big multi-city newspaper chains, the television networks that you know all too well, and these provided excellent journalism. They also generated huge profits. That's gone. What we have now is an ecosystem that has multiple constituent parts, and it's changing all the time. One part is the legacy news organizations, both print and broadcast, which have spread into the web and are doing innovative things on the web. They're facing shrinking profits, sometimes losses, sometimes bankruptcy, sometimes going out of business. But in all cases, they have less money to play with, less ability to take risks. Then there's public radio and television, which is a much smaller in this country than, say, in Britain and some other countries, but still is a significant piece of the pie. Then there's the rise of these bloggers, hundreds of thousands of them that provide opinions and insights into news, and some cases it's silly, but often it's not. They add important facts, and they add insights that can be very valuable. The nonprofit sector is a piece of that, and I think where we can be particularly valuable is in areas like investigative reporting, where the costs are so high, but the impact of the story is so important to society.
One of the things that has been interesting for me to watch is the ability for ProPublica to partner with great news organizations across the world. 10 years ago, people didn't want to partner. They wanted their own staff to do the work because there's also liability questions. My theory is that you put your considerable reputation and all the Pulitzers that you'd won at various times on the chopping block, so people felt a certain confidence that Paul Steiger was at the head of it. Did you feel you were putting your reputation on the line? And can others with not such a long history of newsmaking be that kind of a partner to
Well,
others?
I think, look, you're very kind, but I think your initial point is absolutely right, which is that 10 years ago, you could have had Walter Cronkite leading it, and people wouldn't have taken stories from elsewhere. I wouldn't have taken it at the Wall Street Journal. The editor of the New York Times and the Washington Post and the LA Times would not, except under extraordinary circumstances, have taken stories from alien organizations. But the environment has changed, and so when we got started, we did have an advantage, which was between me and my colleague, our managing editor, Steve Engelberg, who worked for, 15 years at the New York Times and was the editor of the Oregonian in Portland, whoever he didn't know, I knew, and vice versa. So we could at least get our calls returned. But our stories would not have been used were it not for the fact that that news organizations were struggling to some extent, even the best and the biggest, and they wanted our stories, and not only that, they didn't want to see the story appear in a competitor, and so the combination of those elements made it possible for us to get started, and once we appeared on the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post and the LA Times, and we're on the networks, then other people started to say, well, those guys would use them, we can use it too. And so it was a little sticky in the first 6 months to a year, but after that, we've now partnered with practically everybody, more than 90 news organizations of large size and medium size around the country, and some overseas.
Nothing like success breeding success.
Helps.
For sure. Students, I noticed in the Daily Tar Heel, which interviewed you, you told a great story about your daughter, who is constantly on the rope of finding the next job. So the students who are watching this are going to say, that's what I want to be, a watchdog journalist, and I want a nice, stable job with ProPublica.
Well, yeah, my daughter's a film editor in Hollywood, and she has never had a job. It's always, you go from one movie to the next. This movie is over when your parking pass doesn't work anymore, and the phones don't work. And so then you use your network to get the next job. And I think journalism as a career is going to be more like that going forward. You build your equity and your byline and your resume, and one job leads to another. Networking is important. Entrepreneurship is important. Now, there'll be some institutions, I hope ProPublica is one of them, that will have stability. We have 33 journalists. We have, over the course of the year, anywhere from 6 to 10 interns, and we'd love to have applications from your students.
And we looked with great pleasure when we saw your latest hire was a UNC grad. So we know you're into quality. But the last piece for those students, again, who are thinking about how do I make it? The word brand, when people are out there, you got to brand yourself, sometimes turns a lot of people off. It seems like it's more about you than the work. So just give your insights to that student again, how they need to think of themselves as somebody that is more than just the general assignment reporter, but somebody who really brings a package to the employer.
Yeah, I think that the notion of me, and the print journalists racing to get on television and say something outrageous and get famous, that's overrated. I think there's as much downside to that as upside. It works well for some people. I think what is a much more high percentage approach is to break news and do stories in whatever medium or in multimedia that are not run-of-the-mill, that are that move the ball, that have impact, and that's you get known for your work. And it can be a one-person byline on a story like Sherry Fink's Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation of killing patients at a hospital in New Orleans in the aftermath of Katrina, or it can be being part of a team of half a dozen people that has success here, and then you're part of another team that has success there. That gets noticed, and you can build on that and take it to the next job.
And that's what counts.
That is what counts.
And I would leave it right there. Known for your work. That's what it takes to be a great journalist, and you're known for your work. Thanks very much, Paul Steiger.
Thank you very much.